The Keddie Cabin Murders. Brutal massacre in a quiet town. Have you ever wondered how a serene mountain town could become the setting of one of America's most haunting unsolved mysteries? Imagine a quiet vacation cabin, surrounded by peaceful woods and towering pines, where families came to escape the chaos of city life. Now picture that cabin transformed overnight into the site of a brutal massacre that would haunt the town of Keddie, California, for generations. In April 1981, the small, isolated town of Keddie was shaken to its core by a horrifying discovery. The Keddie Cabin murders left 4 victims, an inexplicably untouched crime scene, and a community terrified and questioning everything they thought they knew about their neighbors. This is the story of the Keddie Cabin murders, a mystery filled with dark secrets, strange suspects, and an eerie silence that still lingers over Cabin 28. Keddie, California. In the foothills of Northern California lies the quiet town of Keddie. Known for its fresh mountain air and beautiful scenery, Keddie was the ideal place for those seeking a simpler, slower life. Back in the 1970s and early 80s, Keddie was a place of community, a tiny resort town where everyone knew each other and families looked out for one another. The Keddie Resort, a collection of small cabins nestled into the hills, was a central part of the community. Families vacationed there to enjoy the fresh air, and for a time, it seemed like an idyllic retreat from the stresses of the world. In one of these cabins, Cabin 28, the Sharp family had been trying to start a new life. Sue Sharp, a single mother, had recently moved there with her 5 children after leaving her husband and escaping a troubled marriage. It was supposed to be a fresh start. But for Sue and her children, this cabin would become a place of unimaginable horror. The night of April 11th, 1981. It was a typical Saturday night. Sue was at home with her children, and her teenage daughter Sheila had gone to spend the night with a friend in a nearby cabin. Inside Cabin 28, Sue's 2 youngest boys, Rick and Greg, along with their friend Justin, were sleeping in a room at the back of the cabin. Sue's older son, John, and his friend Dana Wingate had gone out but planned to return later that night. As darkness fell, the mountain town of Keddie was quiet and still. For many, it was just another peaceful night. But at some point during the night, an unthinkable evil found its way into Cabin 28. No one knows exactly when it began, but it was clear by morning that something horrific had occurred in the Sharp family's home. The discovery of the crime scene. The next morning, Sheila returned home from her sleepover. As she approached Cabin 28, she felt a strange, foreboding sense. When she opened the door, her life changed forever. What Sheila found inside was a scene of terror. Her mother, Sue, her brother, John, and his friend, Dana, lay dead in the living room. They had been bound, beaten, and stabbed. Blood stained the walls and furniture, marking the brutality of what had taken place. But there was something even more chilling. Somehow, in the middle of this violent chaos, her younger brothers Rick and Greg, along with their friend Justin, were still alive. They had been asleep in another room, untouched by the horror that had unfolded just a few feet away. How had they been spared? Why had the killers left them unharmed? This haunting question would linger for years. The brutality of the crime. The violence inflicted on the victims was beyond comprehension. Investigators determined that the assailants had not only used knives, but also a hammer, a weapon that left behind disturbing injuries. The victims were bound with electrical cord and medical tape, indicating a level of premeditation that shook the investigators to their core. This wasn't a robbery gone wrong, and it wasn't a spur-of-the-moment attack. This was calculated, brutal, and deeply personal. It seemed that whoever had committed these murders had taken their time. Neighbors reported hearing muffled sounds during the night, but thought little of it in the moment. Little did they know, a massacre was unfolding just next door. The investigation and initial suspects. The local authorities were faced with a daunting task. The small Plumas County Sheriff's Department, unaccustomed to crimes of this scale, struggled to make sense of the scene. Evidence seemed scattered, and there was no clear path to follow. But as they began piecing together clues, they started to focus on two men who seemed to stand out: Martin Smart and his friend, Bo Bubeda. Martin Smart was a local man who lived nearby and was acquainted with the Sharp family. He had a troubling reputation and a history of violent behavior. Martin's friend, Bo, was a drifter with a questionable past. The two men had reportedly been seen around the cabin on the night of the murders, acting suspiciously. What's more, in a startling twist, Martin allegedly confessed to his wife, saying, "I killed Sue." But despite this confession, no arrests were made. Authorities dismissed the confession, claiming there wasn't enough evidence to pursue charges. This baffling decision has led to years of speculation and frustration, with many believing that the case could have been solved if handled differently from the beginning. The lingering mystery and evidence mismanagement. The investigation grew increasingly complicated. Evidence seemed to go missing, and leads were often ignored or dismissed. Some suspected that a cover-up was taking place, possibly involving local authorities who may have known more than they were letting on. Reports emerged that crucial pieces of evidence, such as a bloody hammer found in a nearby pond, had been overlooked. Witnesses claimed to have seen and heard things that were never properly followed up on. For those close to the case, it felt as if the truth was just out of reach, held back by a combination of error, neglect, and perhaps something darker. In the years that followed, the case would grow colder. Families moved away, memories faded, and justice for the Sharp family seemed more elusive with each passing year, reigniting the case and new developments. But even decades later, the Keddie Cabin murders were never forgotten. In recent years, renewed interest in the case has brought new investigators to the scene. Advances in forensic technology have allowed authorities to re-examine evidence that was previously dismissed. Fresh eyes on the case have uncovered new clues, including DNA that may hold the key to solving this mystery once and for all. As more details come to light, the possibility of closure seems closer. Investigators believe that they may finally be able to identify those responsible and bring justice to the victims and their families. But even with these advancements, questions remain. Why were the youngest children left unharmed? What could have driven someone to such extremes in this small, quiet town? And could it be that the killers have been walking free all this time? Theories and speculations. The Keddie Cabin murders have inspired a wealth of theories, each one as chilling as the last. Some believe that the murders were a targeted attack on Sue Sharp, possibly due to a secret she was keeping or a grudge someone held against her. Others speculate that Martin Smart and Bo Bubeda were part of a larger conspiracy, perhaps one involving local figures who wanted to cover up their involvement. Some locals even whisper that the cabin itself holds a curse, that the land remembers what happened that night and will never allow the mystery to be solved. Whether rooted in truth or the result of fear and speculation, these theories continue to haunt the community and keep the mystery alive. The legacy of Cabin 28. For the town of Keddie, Cabin 28 stands as a grim reminder of that horrific night. While the cabin itself was eventually torn down, its memory casts a long shadow over the town. People still talk about the Sharp family, about the horror that shattered the peace of their mountain retreat. To this day, the story of the Keddie Cabin murders is shared, passed down as a cautionary tale and a haunting reminder of how one night can change everything. For the Sharp family and the friends who knew them, the memory of that night remains a wound that refuses to heal. Closing statement: the Keddie Cabin. Murders are more than just an unsolved crime. They are a symbol of unanswered questions, lingering fears, and a mystery that seems determined to remain hidden. Perhaps one day the truth will emerge, and those responsible will be brought to justice. But until then, Cabin 28 remains a dark chapter in small-town America's history. A place where peace was shattered and innocence was forever lost.